Victory at Agincourt had transformed Henry V from a young, ambitious king into a legendary figure. A warrior king destined, it seemed, to unite two kingdoms under one crown. But Henry's ambition wasn't satisfied by a single battle, no matter how legendary. In the years that followed Agincourt, Henry launched a relentless series of campaigns aimed at crushing French resistance. Towns fell, cities surrendered, and eventually, he achieved one of the greatest diplomatic triumphs in medieval history. The Treaty of Troyes, which formally recognized Henry as heir to the throne of France. But could Henry truly secure this ambitious claim and unite France and England permanently? What drove his endless hunger for conquest, and how would his relentless pursuit of power lead him not to everlasting glory, but to an early and tragic end? In this episode, we'll explore the dramatic conclusion of Henry's life, the brutal sieges, political maneuvers, personal sacrifices, and fateful decisions that brought him to the brink of an Anglo-French empire. This is the story of a king whose victories reshaped Europe, whose ambitions had no limit, and whose untimely death changed the course of history forever. After Agincourt, Henry V stood at the pinnacle of power, but his ambition was far from satisfied. His eyes remained fixed firmly on the ultimate prize, the French crown itself. Victory had opened doors, but to secure his legacy, Henry needed more than a single triumph. He needed sustained conquest, lasting dominance, and unquestionable legitimacy. And so began a relentless campaign, one that would sweep across France with a force rarely seen before. In 1417, 2 years after Agincourt, Henry returned to France with a large, well-equipped army, invading Normandy, the ancient heartland of English-French rivalry. His strategy was ruthless yet strategic: capture major cities, isolate Paris, and pressure the weakened French leadership into submission. City after city fell to Henry's forces. Caen surrendered after a fierce siege, opening the gateway to Normandy. Cherbourg, Bayeux, and numerous smaller towns quickly followed. Each victory amplified Henry's prestige and depleted French morale. But the most brutal chapter of this campaign was yet to come: the siege of Rouen. Rouen was one of France's largest cities, fortified, wealthy, and fiercely loyal. Henry knew that capturing it would crush French resistance in the region. The siege lasted months, marked by intense suffering on both sides. Civilians starved, defenders fought desperately, but in the end, Rouen fell. Its surrender sent shockwaves across France. Henry's victories weren't merely military, they were carefully crafted psychological blows. Every captured city and castle deepened French despair, making it increasingly clear that resistance against Henry's forces was futile. Henry masterfully projected strength, but also showed calculated mercy, pardoning select defenders to appear generous while harshly punishing others to deter future resistance. Yet Henry's ambition was as political as it was military. He carefully managed his image, presenting himself not as an invader, but as the rightful heir to the French throne, reclaiming what was his by blood and divine right. He skillfully exploited France's internal divisions, playing rival factions against each other, steadily weakening France from within. His campaign was costly, both financially and humanly, but Henry believed it was worth the price. He saw himself not just as a king of England, but as a ruler chosen by destiny to unite two powerful kingdoms under one crown. Every move he made was part of a calculated strategy to fulfill that vision. By 1420, after years of relentless campaigning, Henry was within reach of his greatest political triumph yet: a formal treaty that would recognize him as heir to the French throne, permanently altering the balance of power in Europe. Agincourt had been the start of his legend, but Normandy proved Henry's resolve. He had shown France, and the world, that his ambitions had no boundaries, his will no limits. But Henry's ambition was a double-edged sword. It fueled his victories, but it also drove him ever closer to his own destruction, and the kingdom he hoped to unite under his rule would soon find itself on a path toward chaos. After years of relentless campaigning and siege warfare, Henry V's ambitions finally reached the diplomatic climax at Troyes in 1420. Here, in the cathedral city east of Paris, history would be rewritten. The Treaty of Troyes was nothing short of revolutionary. Negotiated between Henry V, the mentally unstable French King Charles VI, and the powerful Duke of Burgundy, the treaty officially named Henry heir to the French throne. In a single stroke, Henry achieved diplomatically what English kings had failed to achieve through war alone for nearly a century. But the treaty went even further. It arranged Henry's marriage to Charles VI's daughter, Catherine of Valois, creating a legitimate royal connection between England and France. It was a political masterstroke, cementing Henry's claim and paving the way for a united Anglo-French kingdom. Europe watched in astonishment as Henry's claims, previously dismissed as ambitious fantasies, were now formally recognized by France itself. The once mighty French kingdom appeared to capitulate, placing its future in the hands of an English king. Yet the treaty was not without controversy. It effectively disinherited Charles VI's own son, the Dauphin, who was declared illegitimate and cast aside. This deepened divisions within France and further fueled the already intense civil conflict between the Armagnac and Burgundian factions. Moreover, the treaty required ongoing English military presence to enforce its terms, creating resentment among the French populace. Many saw the treaty not as a path to peace, but as a thinly disguised occupation, and anti-English sentiment grew rapidly across France. For Henry, the treaty represented validation. He had gambled everything on his French ambitions, and Troyes seemed the ultimate proof that destiny favored his cause. England celebrated again, certain that their king had achieved the impossible. But beneath the surface, the treaty carried dangerous seeds of future conflict. Many French nobles and citizens viewed it not as a peace settlement, but as a humiliating betrayal. It deepened bitterness and sparked further resistance, creating rifts that would never truly heal. Henry himself saw Troyes not as the end, but the beginning of a new era. With Catherine by his side and the French throne within his grasp, his vision of a unified kingdom seemed tantalizingly close. But what Henry did not foresee was how fragile his victory truly was. His ambition had reached its apex at Troyes, yet the peace he had forged would soon be shattered, plunging both kingdoms into deeper chaos than ever before. With the Treaty of Troyes secured, Henry V seemed invincible. But the peace he created on parchment soon proved fleeting. France remained restless, and Henry knew that securing his claim meant continued war. In late 1421, Henry returned to France yet again, determined to crush the lingering pockets of resistance. His campaign now turned to the fortified city of Meaux, near Paris, a stronghold of fierce French resistance and a strategic threat to his rule. The siege of Meaux was brutal, prolonged, and exhausting. Winter conditions worsened an already grueling campaign. English soldiers suffered terribly, battling harsh weather, disease, and fierce defenders who refused to surrender. Henry himself took personal command, leading by example, sharing the hardships of his men. But this hands-on approach would soon take a toll. Henry's health began deteriorating. Chroniclers described him as pale and weak, a shadow of the vigorous warrior king who had triumphed at Agincourt. His relentless campaigning had taken a severe physical toll. Reports surfaced of him coughing, feverish, weakened by illness yet stubbornly refusing rest or medical advice. Yet Henry pressed on relentlessly, driven by both pride and paranoia. He was obsessed with solidifying his French conquest, unwilling to trust his destiny to others, even as trusted advisors pleaded with him to withdraw and recover. Each passing day of siege wore him down, but retreat was not an option. To Henry, backing down would mean failure, a humiliation worse than death. Finally, after months of bitter siege warfare, Meaux surrendered in May 1422. It was a hard-won victory but came at enormous human and strategic cost. Many of Henry's best soldiers had died or succumbed to disease. His own health had severely worsened, leaving him physically exhausted and vulnerable. Still, Henry stubbornly planned new offensives, dreaming of further conquests even as his body failed him. England faced internal instability, while France erupted into renewed warfare. But destiny had other plans. By summer 1422, Henry's health collapsed dramatically. His illness, likely dysentery, rapidly progressed, defying all medical intervention. Despite desperate prayers and frantic remedies, Henry weakened day by day, unable to rally as he once had. He retreated to the Château de Vincennes near Paris, his condition critical. Advisors, nobles, and even former rivals gathered anxiously, aware that if the king died, the future of England and France hung by a fragile thread. Henry, however, refused to yield, still issuing commands, still envisioning battles he would never fight. On August 31, 1422, Henry V, England's great warrior king, died at just 35 years old, far from home, his ambitions unfulfilled. His sudden death plunged both kingdoms into uncertainty. Henry's infant son, barely 9 months old, inherited 2 crowns he could not yet wear, leaving a dangerous power vacuum. England faced internal instability, while France erupted into renewed warfare. Henry's final return had been fateful indeed, bringing him closer than ever to his ultimate ambition, only to see it unravel, defeated not by enemy swords, but by his relentless pursuit of glory. The news of Henry V's death sent shockwaves across Europe. The warrior king, who had seemed destined to unite 2 powerful kingdoms, had died suddenly and prematurely, leaving behind a complex legacy and a dangerous void of leadership. Henry's final moments at Château de Vincennes near Paris were marked by frustration and quiet desperation. Bedridden and feverish, he still tried to issue orders, fighting death as stubbornly as he had fought the French. His last words reflected both his unfulfilled ambition and his deep anxiety over his kingdom's future. He instructed his advisors to ensure his infant son, Henry VI, would inherit not just a throne but a secure and unified realm. Yet, even as Henry drew his last breath, his carefully constructed empire began to unravel. Henry's death left his son as the youngest monarch in English history. The infant king was less than a year old, completely unable to rule or even understand his immense responsibilities. This triggered immediate power struggles among the nobles and advisors who scrambled to control the young king, and through him, the crown. In France, Henry's death offered immediate hope and opportunity. The Treaty of Troyes was instantly jeopardized. The disinherited Dauphin, Charles, saw his chance to reclaim the throne. Civil war flared again, reigniting conflict as French factions rose to challenge English dominance. Henry's carefully built alliances began fracturing overnight. Henry's body was transported back to England amid solemn and lavish ceremony. He was buried with immense honor in Westminster Abbey, near his legendary ancestor Edward III. Yet the elaborate funeral could not disguise the mounting anxiety over the kingdom's future. England was mourning not just a king, but a promise unfulfilled. The nation quickly descended into internal tension. Without Henry's firm hand, nobles clashed over influence, lands, and titles. Rivalries that had been suppressed during Henry's powerful reign suddenly re-emerged, threatening the stability he had worked so hard to achieve. As years passed, Henry's complex legacy became clearer. He was remembered as a great military commander, a king of immense ambition and formidable skill, but also as a ruler whose dreams exceeded reality. His pursuit of the French crown had reshaped history, yet it had also left both kingdoms exhausted and destabilized. Historians still debate whether Henry's ambitions ultimately benefited or harmed England. His victories at Agincourt and Troyes established a brief but dazzling moment of English dominance in Europe. Yet these triumphs were fragile, built on warfare, bloodshed, and deep political divisions. In the end, Henry V's legacy wasn't simply about conquest or glory. It was about the price of ambition, the fragility of power, and the human cost of relentless pursuit. His short reign had brought England to unprecedented heights, but it also left behind an unstable inheritance, fragile alliances, and the seeds of future conflict. Henry V had sought immortality through conquest, but history would remember him more for the complexity of his ambitions and the chaos they unleashed after his death. The warrior king was gone, leaving behind a legacy that would haunt both England and France for generations to come. The life and death of Henry V remain among history's greatest lessons in ambition, leadership, and the price of power. Henry rose to incredible heights, achieving victories few thought possible. He forged a legacy at Agincourt and Troyes that still echoes today. But his relentless pursuit of conquest ultimately brought about his own downfall and plunged two kingdoms into decades of chaos. His premature death didn't just mark the end of a king, it symbolized the fragility of ambition itself. Henry dreamed of uniting England and France, yet his vision outlived him in ways he never intended, sparking generations of war, internal strife, and a fractured inheritance for his infant son. Henry's story teaches us something timeless. Power can be won through strength and strategy, but holding onto it requires wisdom, patience, and sometimes restraint. His remarkable life reveals both the glory and tragedy of unbridled ambition. In the next episode, we'll explore another crucial piece of Henry's legacy, the secret behind his legendary victories, the English longbow, and how this powerful weapon reshaped medieval warfare forever. Because the greatest legacies aren't always left by kings alone, they're also shaped by the tools that made the triumphs possible. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Part 5, The Secrets of the English Longbow, is coming soon. This is History Replay, this day.